It's X-Men. The message is the premise. This is a very interesting statement that deserves some expanding upon and exploration, because here within lies a key core fundamental misunderstanding that most writers and creators of entertainment media today have about the nature of progress, progressivism, and the message in and of itself, and the reason why media is getting crazier and crazier, and why there seems to be no end to the DEI absurdity. So, before we get into this, let me set the scene right here, because there are some concepts we're going to have to expand on here. This comes from X-Men from the Ashes, which is apparently supposed to be a pretty major rework or a new era of the X-Men comics, as the current setting is controversial, shall we say. And after having seen Nature Girl tear a store clerk's throat open because she found a turtle choking on a piece of plastic, I can see why. A lot of people were arguing that maybe the entire thing just needs to be burnt to the ground and started from the ground up again. Perhaps even we could introduce the revolutionary notion of creating a good story first and worrying about politics later. This was of course shut down with the usual vehemency, stating quite clearly that if you don't agree with my ideology, I will simply ban you, because I am a doctrinally indoctrinated moron. And is in essence the translation of this right here. And it's X-Men, the message is the premise. So, the message. What is the message? The message is the furthest left you can go and still have it be at least somewhat socially acceptable. That is the best possible definition of the message, as it is always being pushed further to the left. It is the idea of progressivism, progress at any cost, no matter how ridiculous, no matter how absurd, because it undermines society. We can go all the way to Antonio Gramsci here and how they're in essence trying to, well, ruin our world and replace it with their own ideals from the ashes, which is a, well, pretty good point considering the subject matter here, so that it will be easier to introduce introduce for the first time communism, because if there is no society, then finally communism will totally work, right? We'll see about that, but they also then often confuse progress for progressivism. This is the reason that is used to fool people like Tom Bremmert here, for example, into this nonsense, and also to lure other people into it. They will say things like Star Trek was progressive. No, Star Trek was not progressive, it had elements of progress in it, and there is a very fundamental distinction to be made there. Progress could be something like Uhura, for example. Absolutely, no doubt about it. First black female, major lead in Star Trek. Absolutely, a major lead character. Absolutely, that is a progress thing, because now we are moving towards colorblindness, where the entire idea is we judge people based upon their character, not upon their external characteristics. And having black people in media is absolutely a good thing. Progressivism, on the other hand, is there are too many white people here. See the difference? One features people of every color, the other excludes people based on color, and artificially advantages certain groups based on their color. That is progressivism. That is the message. But this runs into a bit of a problem, because the message is no longer the same message as it once was, because at one point the message will have been reasonable. When the message said, hey, gay people should be allowed to have civil marriages, that was a reasonable message. When the message becomes, we can change gender at any point, the message becomes unreasonable. When sexuality becomes fluid, the message becomes unreasonable. There is a stopping point here, where there is progress and progressivism where progress is at any cost. The original message of X-Men, if we ignore the fact that Stan Lee created the X-Men simply because he was sick of coming up with backstories for his heroes, which was the original reason, by the way, because he figured, okay, radioactive spiders, gamma radiation, magic space bullshit, I've done it all, let's just make them mutants. That way, if I need a new one, well, it's just a new mutation, simple dimple. But it then moved into more of a social commentary thing, right? The key message of X-Men was that we were all people. Despite our various differences, we were all people. We wanted the same things. We wanted safety, we wanted inclusion, we wanted to be a part of something larger, we wanted to fit in. Xavier's School for Gifted Youngsters was exactly that, a place where mutants could come together and be together with other mutants. It was connections, what every young person wants, to belong somewhere, to have a friend group, to be along like-minded people and fit in, right? And this also extended onto other commentaries like Tribalism with Magneto, where he is, well, I'm evil because I saw my people eradicated during the Second World War, and I need to protect my new people, the mutants, from the same thing happening to them. Question mark though, Magneto, what's your plan for the human race? Extermination. Oh, a bit of a final solution, eh? What? Right, yes, Magneto. You've become the thing you hate. Because tribalism is just that. It is everything I do, good and beautiful, everything you do, vile and evil. Even if you're doing the exact same thing, with humanity oppressing mutants in self-defense, and Magneto saying we must suppress humanity in self-defense. Now, of course, this idea that absolute moralism for your side makes you into a Nazi, well, that's a point that might hit a bit too close to home to current-year progressives. So, I'm sure they'll skip right over that one. But this was at its core the idea that everyone's people a nice message. It was a colorblind message. We were not to look at each other's external characteristics, but rather our actual character. A good message. However, it has evolved and moved far beyond that, to the point where today, colorblindness is racism, because you are not taking into consideration the realities of racist systems, and how our entire world is inherently racist. So, for you to understand what the current day message is, I need to tell you a little bit about intersectionality. Oh yes, the current bleeding edge of leftism. See, back in the day, our idea was, well, everyone should be equal, obviously. Like, we've seen racism, we've seen slavery, we're going to get rid of all of that, we're going to build a system where everyone is equal before the law, same rules for everyone, it'll be as fair as humanly possible. And then the progressives came along and said, yeah, but I'm oppressed. And he began with the idea of feminism, of course. I'm oppressed because I'm a woman. And then that moved on with Kimberly Crenshaw into intersectionality. Now, like many things, it has at least a kernel of truth to it. The best propaganda always does. As Kimberly Crenshaw's main example is that you can have prejudice in a case where you have a legally correct thing. So, the example she gives is of a black woman who has not been given a job. Now, she says that this is actual discrimination, and so she takes it to court. Now, the court then looks at the employment and goes, well, they've hired women for the job that she claims to have been discriminated against in. So clearly, it is not discrimination against women because the company has hired other women. Similarly, the company has also hired black men to do other jobs. Thus, it cannot be a racial discrimination thing because they have black people working at their company. And thus, the court will say, we can find no evidence of racial or sexual discrimination at this workplace. Your lawsuit is therefore without merit. Kimberly Crenshaw thus posits that it could be possible that the person hiring doesn't have a problem with black people and doesn't have a problem with women, but he does have a problem with black women, and that this is a blind spot in the law. And this is theoretically possible. There could be a person out there who's like, yeah, I've got no problem with black people or women, I just really dislike that particular combination. Oddly specific, but okay. theoretically. The problem is, however, that once you start allowing this idea to happen, that you need to take into consideration every single element, you end up with an inevitably and unendingly ballooning series of grievances. As my opponent in a recent debate says, a laundry list of grievances, which is the definition of intersectionality, which I will be using from now on. A laundry list of grievances. As this began out with, for example, age, ability, race, sexual orientation, gender identity, class, then we slap on a couple other things, legal status, nationality, ethnicity, sexual orientation, social status, linguistic diversity, age, disability, then we slap on yet further appearance, fertility, culture, physical health, hobbies, education, and it just keeps going. As once you head down this rabbit hole, there is no end to the amount of vectors of oppression, being the technical term, that you can slap onto yourself. Even if you can then find an example in the previous work where they hired a black woman, they then go, but she's not my age. Okay, shit, well, we found one that was in your age group as well. Now what? Well, she's not Ethiopian. Oh, Christ. Okay, well, we found an Ethiopian, so that's okay, right? No, because she's a legal immigrant. I'm undocumented. Oh, God. Wait, why are you even making this argument then? Etc., 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 etc. As this is the core of progressivism, the idea of building everything down until the point where the system itself collapses, because there is no way in which you can run a judicial system based upon this. You simply cannot. If you are going to take into consideration every single last iota of a person's identity, every race, culture, occupation, ethnicity, age, history, upbringing, geographic location, gender, ability, education, religion, class, sexuality, language, immigration status, etc., obesity, attractiveness, fertility, it just goes indefinitely. You will always be racist and oppressive against someone because you will never have the perfect diversity. You will never have perfect representation, and so you will always be racist. There is always a further goalpost to be moved. It is a system specifically designed to turn any system you build up to try and appease it in upon itself, to infinitely keep eating the snake. Because again, the goal of this is not an actually fair society. It isn't actually to have people see justice, it is to destroy things. That is the core fundamental, even if that is not the intent of it explicitly, it is the inevitable end conclusion of any system that constantly swipes its own legs from underneath it and degrades it and devalues it and undermines it at every single solitary step. This is the current year message. X-Men's message was, we're all people, let's treat each other decently like normal. Let us not look at Magneto and say, he's bad because he's a mutant. Let us instead look at him and go, no, he's crazy because he wants to exterminate people. That's why. Whereas intersectionality will look at all of his points of, well, identity, and find various reasons why we shouldn't condemn that part because we can justify it in some way or another. It is a way to, well, further enforce the tribalism that Magneto was in many ways intended to warn against. This is also why the message can never stop. This is why they are never happy. This is why there is actually literally no mathematical possibility of ever pleasing the progressives, because they are never going to be pleased until everything we have is simply gone. Only when we exist in the perfectly flat, uncreative ruins of civilization, where nothing exists, everything is merely grey. Once we have entered the void, and we are all nothing but atoms, perhaps we will have reached their elusive state of actual equality. But we don't actually want to get there, do we? The X-Men definitely are not about getting there either. And this is why we have shit entertainment, right here, because it is fundamentally deconstructivist. Nothing can be allowed to exist in a good way. Nothing can be virtuous. Nothing can be positive. Nothing can actually be established to make the world better, because it must always be negative so that it can be removed and replaced with something better. Heavy quotation marks intended, before that too becomes in opposition to the message. It is an unending spiral. This is also why it never gets any actual better. This is why people are looking at the announcement of a new big thing and wondering to themselves, this is going to be shit, isn't it? This is why people are holding their breath as there are any announcement made today. When, back in the day, when they said they were making a Lord of the Rings movie series, trilogy, everyone was, wow! When they were making Harry Potter, like, wow, this is amazing! When they're making a new Superman movie, this is amazing! Now, we meet every such announcement with skepticism at best and outright horror at worst. Because even if we don't understand all of the technicalities around it, we are very easily capable of recognizing the fact that everything just gets worse. And the only way we can ever actually hope of returning to quality is by rejecting the message and instead getting back to the point of it all, which was making good stories with good messages, rather than simply the message. Until next time, I've been Arch, thank you all very much for watching, and I do hope to see you all again soon. Till then, have a good day.